Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most mind-bending prophecies for our future, coming straight from Elon Musk. We're talking about a world with no jobs, AI that's smarter than all of us combined, and maybe, just maybe, a way to hack death itself.
So let's just jump right in with a wild question. What if I told you that in just a few years, your job, and pretty much everyone else's, could become totally optional? I know, it sounds like something out of a movie, but according to Musk, this isn't science fiction. It's a future with a very real and very close deadline. And he's not talking about some gradual shift. He uses the phrase supersonic tsunami, an unstoppable force that's going to hit all of us. So what on earth is powering a storm this big?
Well, according to Musk, this whole transformation basically boils down to two things. Two critical resources that are at the heart of a new global race. A truly massive amount of energy to power AI, and the super intelligent chips that are going to consume all of it.
First up, let's talk energy. The source material frames this with a really cool sci-fi concept called the Kardashoff scale. It's basically a report card for how advanced a civilization is based on how much energy it can control. A Type 1 civilization can harness all the energy on its home planet. And here's the crazy part. We're not even a Type 1 yet. Not even close.
Now, this is where the current power struggle gets really interesting. In this race for more energy, China is just pulling away like crazy. By 2026, it's projected that their electricity output will be 3 times that of the United States. That kind of energy advantage could be the single biggest factor in who wins the AI race.
So how can the US possibly compete with that? Musk's answer is, well, classic Musk. Get off the planet. His plan is to use those reusable SpaceX rockets to build gigantic solar farms and even AI data centers up in orbit, where the sun never sets. And here's the genius part. Instead of trying to beam all that bulky electricity back down, they just send back the answers, the fully processed information.
All right, so that's engine number 1. Let's move to the second engine, the race for pure computational power. Because having all the energy in the world doesn't mean a thing if you don't have the brains, or in this case, the computer chips, to put it to work. And this is where things get super complex. You see, the real bottleneck isn't just making the chips, the GPUs. It's the whole ecosystem you need to run them. You need an insane amount of electricity, you need transformers to handle all that power, and you need massive cooling systems to stop it all from melting. If any single one of those things fails, the whole AI revolution grinds to a halt. This whole situation sets up a fascinating clash of strategies. You've got the US, which has the clear lead in designing the most powerful cutting-edge chips, but they're held back by their energy supply. And then you have China, who might be a bit behind on the chip tech, but they have this colossal, ever-growing energy grid to power whatever they build at a scale nobody else can match.
So, what happens when these two curves, limitless energy and super intelligent chips, finally smash into each other? When these two engines of the future are running at full throttle, what does that actually mean for us, for society?
The answer, at least according to Musk, is a future where AI and robots just do everything. We're talking about a world of incredible abundance, where our entire model of economics is just completely thrown out the window.
And the timeline he gives is just shocking. He thinks we could have AGI, that's artificial general intelligence, an AI smarter than any single human, as early as 2026. And by 2030, he believes the total intelligence of all AI on the planet will be greater than the combined brainpower of every single human being.
Okay, so if the robots are doing all the work, how do people live? How do you buy anything? The idea proposed is something called universal high income. And no, that's not just basic income to scrape by. It's a high income where all the wealth created by the AI is just distributed to everybody.
Now, before you dismiss this as pure fantasy, a small-scale version of this idea already exists. For decades, the Alaska Permanent Fund, which is funded by the state's oil money, has paid out a dividend to every single resident every single year. It's a real-world proof that this kind of model can work.
And this leads to what might be Musk's most radical piece of advice. Stop saving money for the long-term future. His thinking goes like this. With AI and robotic labor, the cost of almost everything, food, housing, energy, is going to drop to nearly zero. This would create massive deflation, which means the whole reason you save money for retirement just vanishes. Why would you need a nest egg when everything is abundant and practically free?
So, if completely upending our global economy wasn't enough, this technological boom could let us rewrite our own biology. The next big frontier isn't about how we live, it's about how long we live.
There's this concept called life's escape velocity, and it's a wild thought. Imagine a point where, for every year you get older, medical science can add more than a year back to your life expectancy. If we can reach that point, then aging, in theory, becomes a solvable problem. You could live indefinitely.
Musk, being an engineer, looks at this like a programming problem. He argues our bodies aren't just randomly falling apart. It's more like they're running a biological program that tells them to age and eventually die. And if it's a program, well, that means it can be understood. And maybe, just maybe, it can be hacked.
But, and this is a really big but, this vision of the future isn't all sunshine and rainbows. The source material gives a really profound warning here. In a life where you don't have to work, where you don't have to struggle, where there are no real challenges, what gives your life meaning?
And that really leaves us with the ultimate question. If we solve scarcity, if we solve work, if we even solve death, what do we do with all that time? In a future without the problems that have defined us for thousands of years, we'll suddenly face a brand new challenge, figuring out our own purpose. And that's one question technology can't answer for us. Thanks for joining The Explainer.
Okay, forget everything you think you know about global power. We're not talking about armies or money anymore. No, a new race has started, a much more fundamental one. And the prize? It isn't cash, it's pure, raw energy. Let's dive into how this huge shift is already happening right under our noses.
And this right here, this quote is the key to understanding, well, pretty much the next 100 years. You see, as our world gets more and more automated, totally run by AI, the real way to measure a country's power is going to be its ability to generate electricity. The watt is becoming the new dollar.
And look, don't think this is some far-off sci-fi concept. This race is on, right now. The country that controls the energy controls the computers. And that means they control the AI, the robots, the whole future economy. The stakes, they literally couldn't be any higher.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this energy race, we have to think bigger. I mean, way bigger. We need to think on a civilizational level, using a ruler that, until recently, was pure science fiction.
So let me ask you, how do you measure how advanced a society is? Is it their economy, their military, maybe their culture? Well, there's another way to look at it, a much more basic one, and it all boils down to a single thing: energy.
This is it, the Kardashoff scale. It basically sorts civilizations by how much energy they can get their hands on. A Type 1 civilization can use all the power on its home planet. A Type 2 can harness its entire star. Type 3, the whole galaxy. What's so wild is that this idea is no longer just for sci-fi novels, it's becoming a real strategic goal for entire nations. So where are we on this scale? Well, here's the crazy part. Humanity isn't even a Type 1 civilization yet. We're still figuring out how to use all of Earth's resources. But the ultimate goal, the real game changer, is hitting Type 2 status, being able to capture the unbelievable power of our own sun.
And nobody puts this into perspective better than Elon Musk. It's just a perfect analogy. Why are we down here struggling with these little twigs, fossil fuels, even renewables on Earth, when there is a gigantic, completely free fusion reactor just hanging out in the sky? The sun is the ultimate power source, period. So if energy is the yardstick for progress, it's also about to become the very foundation of our economy. We're talking about a completely new financial world.
Now here's the crucial idea. As AI and robots start doing everything, making our cars, delivering our packages, their main cost isn't paying workers, it's electricity. Just imagine a car's price tag not in dollars, but in the kilowatt hours an automated factory used to build it. That's what we mean by the watt standard.
All right, that brings us from these future ideas right back to the cold, hard reality of today. If the watt is the new dollar, who's actually winning the race to make them? The answer, well, it's probably not who you think.
Before we jump into the numbers, let's be absolutely crystal clear about something. This AI race everyone's obsessed with, the fight for smarter code and faster chips, it's not really about that. Underneath it all, it's a race for electricity. AI data centers are just incredibly thirsty for power.
The United States has led the world in chip design and AI software for a long time, but does it lead in the one resource that makes all of that possible?
This one number says it all. This is the gap. And it's not a tiny little lead. We're talking about a massive, strategic canyon that could very well define who leads the world for the next generation.
The numbers are just staggering.
By 2026, projections show China generating 3 times more electricity than the United States. In a world where computer power is directly linked to electrical power, a lead like this gives China a truly decisive edge in the AI race.
So you look at a gap that big, and you have to wonder, how could the US ever compete? Well, Elon Musk has an idea. And it's so out there, so audacious, it sounds like something straight out of a movie. But it might just be the only way forward.
So first you have to understand the problems we have right here on Earth. Just building more power plants isn't the answer. We lose tons of energy just sending it through power lines. We have actual shortages of things like transformers, and AI data centers need a ridiculous amount of power just to keep themselves from melting. Oh, and our best energy source, the sun, only works half the time.
And here is the brilliant twist in Musk's strategy. For years, people talked about space solar, but the idea was always to beam the energy down to Earth, which is just incredibly wasteful. The new plan flips that on its head. Don't bring the power to the computers, bring the power-hungry computers to the power source.
See, this isn't about playing catch-up anymore. This is a strategic move to, like in a race, overtake on the curve. You're not just trying to go faster, you're changing the rules of the race itself to blow past the competition.
And the plan itself is actually pretty simple when you break it down. Step 1. Use reusable rockets to make it cheap enough to launch data centers into orbit. Step 2. Up there, they get sunshine 24/7 with no clouds, no night, no atmosphere in the way. And step 3. Instead of trying to send massive amounts of energy back down, you just send the answer, the final result, back as a tiny, lightweight data signal.
Now, the economics of this are what make it a real strategy and not just a fantasy. Down here on Earth, the cost of power, cooling, all the grid parts, it's all going up. Meanwhile, the cost to launch stuff into space is plummeting because of reusable rockets. We could soon see what's called a golden cross, the point where it actually becomes cheaper to run a computer in space than on the ground.
And this whole grand plan, this entire vision, it all hangs on one single breakthrough technology: reusable rockets. They are the key. They are what takes this from a cool sci-fi idea and turns it into a real, plausible path to winning the energy war.
Which leaves us with this one last incredible thought. We've always thought of the power grid as this web of wires strung across the land. But what if the future of energy, the future of computing, and the future of global power isn't on Earth at all? What if it's circling silently, high above our heads?
Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, what if I told you that in less than a decade, the whole idea of having a job could become optional? It sounds like science fiction, right? But that's the future Elon Musk laid out in a recent, pretty stunning interview. He's talking about a complete reinvention of society, and he thinks it's all happening by 2030. So how on earth do we get from here to there? Let's break it down.
It all kicks off with this incredibly aggressive timeline. First, Musk is predicting that by 2026, just a couple of years away, we'll have AGI. That's artificial general intelligence, an AI that's as smart as any human. But, get this, that's just the warm-up act. By 2030, he says we're looking at an intelligence explosion. AI won't just match us, its combined brainpower will surpass all of humanity put together.
So we're not just talking about a better Siri here. This is about creating a totally new kind of intelligence. An AI that can literally do its own science, write its own papers, and, this is the crucial part, improve itself over and over without any help from us. Just imagine that. A relentless feedback loop of intelligence getting smarter at an exponential rate. That's the engine Musk believes will completely reshape our world.
And, of course, this leads us to the elephant in the room. It's the one question that hangs over this entire vision, the one you're probably screaming in your head right now. If AI can do everything better than us, what's left for us to do? So what does this end of work actually look like? Well, Musk's prediction isn't just about a few jobs disappearing. He's talking about the whole concept of work becoming obsolete. Just try to wrap your head around that. A future where a job is something you choose to do, maybe for fun or for a sense of purpose, not something you have to do just to survive.
But wait, if nobody's working, how does anyone get paid? The answer he proposes is a new idea called Universal High Income, or UHI. Now, you've probably heard of Universal Basic Income, UBI, right? That's just enough to cover the basics. UHI is like UBI on steroids. We're not just talking about survival money, we're talking about a system that gives everyone a high standard of living, completely funded by the productivity of all those AI and robots. In this future, AI and robots are doing everything. They're growing the food, building the houses, making the goods. Because of that, the cost to produce almost anything drops to nearly zero. This creates something called a deflationary economy. All you need to know is that instead of prices going up every year like we're used to, they constantly go down. Your money actually becomes more valuable over time. This idea just completely flips our entire understanding of money on its head. I mean, think about it. Why would you aggressively save for retirement if the stuff you want, the house, the car, that big trip, is actually going to be way, way cheaper in 20 years? It's a total paradigm shift in how we think about wealth and planning for the future.
Okay, this all sounds like a utopia, right? A little too good to be true. Let's get real for a second. Where is all this money for universal high income actually supposed to come from? Let's dig into the nuts and bolts of how a society like this could even be funded.
You know, the model for this isn't actually pure science fiction. It's based on things that already exist, like the Alaska Permanent Fund. Basically, Alaska takes all its oil money, invests it, and then pays out a dividend to every single resident every year. The idea here is to do the exact same thing, but on a global scale. Only instead of oil, the resource is the unimaginable productivity of AI and robots. But for this to work, the scale has to be, well, it's just mind-boggling. Musk's whole vision is built on a future where there are around 10 billion humanoid robots. That's more than one productive, tireless robot worker for every single person on Earth, all generating a constant, massive stream of wealth that can be taxed. But here's the catch, and it is a huge one. This utopian dream has a really dark flip side. It all leads to a massive, critical question. What happens if all this incredible new wealth isn't shared?
And this really is the trillion-dollar question, isn't it? This whole beautiful vision hinges on the idea that the handful of tech giants who will own all the AI and all the robots will just be willing to share the trillions in profit they're making. Will they really agree to be taxed at a level that funds a life of leisure for everyone else? Because if that wealth gets hoarded at the top, we don't get a utopia. No, we get a full-blown cyberpunk dystopia. We get a future of inequality so extreme we can't even imagine it, where these megacorporations are more powerful than actual countries, and society is split between a tiny, hyper-rich elite and, well, everyone else. All right, let's bring this down to a more personal level. As this huge AI transition starts to happen, who's actually going to lose their job first? Musk's answer here is probably not who you think it is. Yeah, we've always been told that robots are coming for the manual labor jobs, right? The plumbers, the construction workers. Musk says, nope, wrong. He argues the exact opposite is true. He thinks the knowledge workers, the lawyers, the accountants, the coders, are actually at a higher risk because at the end of the day, AI is just fundamentally better and faster at thinking and processing information than any human brain. This shift would even change the whole point of education. I mean, think about it. If AI can be the perfect, personalized teacher for any subject in the world, what's the point of sitting in a giant university lecture hall? Musk argues that in the future, the main purpose of college will be less about learning facts and more about just being a place for young people to connect and socialize. And all of this, every single piece of it, brings us to the final and maybe the toughest question of all. In a future where our minds and our bodies are no longer needed for labor, where we are, from a purely economic standpoint, kind of useless, what is our purpose? You know, so much of our identity, our self-worth as human beings is tied up in our work, in contributing, in overcoming challenges, and being needed by society. That old saying, be careful what you wish for, suddenly sounds terrifyingly real, doesn't it? A life with no struggle sounds amazing, but could it also be a life with no meaning? And really, that's the ultimate takeaway here. The biggest challenge of this AI-driven future might not be economic, it might be spiritual. It forces all of us to start thinking about a really profound question. If we no longer have to work to live, what exactly do we live for? All right, today on The Explainer, we're digging into a recent interview with Elon Musk that completely flips the script on the race for AI dominance. Turns out there's a massive bottleneck that almost no one is talking about, and it's much, much bigger than just computer chips. Okay, so let's get right into it. For a while now, we've all been told the same story, right? The AI race is a chip race. It's all about who can get their hands on the most powerful GPUs. Demand has just been insane, and the assumption is whoever gets the most silicon wins. Simple. But here's the twist.
In a recent podcast, Elon Musk, a guy who needs these chips more than pretty much anyone on the planet, actually defended TSMC, the world's biggest chip maker, for being, well, kind of slow with its expansion. Now, why on earth would he do that? It makes no sense.
And yeah, it seems totally contradictory, especially when you hear what his own plans are to solve this exact problem for himself.
See, to get around this whole supply problem, Musk has basically said, fine, I'll do it myself. He wants to build his very own chip factory, what they call a fab, because he's not going to be held back by somebody else's schedule. And he's not messing around. He's aiming for the most advanced tech out there, the 2-nanometer process. I mean, to put that in perspective, we're talking about technology so small, it's almost hard to even imagine. This is the same level as TSMC's absolute best, the kind of tech that entire countries are fighting over. But this is where you get peak Musk. He's actually claimed that he wants a factory where he can just walk in, smoke a cigar, and eat a burger. Now, anyone who knows anything about chip making knows that's just insane. These places are cleaner than operating rooms. A single speck of dust can ruin everything. Which brings us right back to the big puzzle. If the chip shortage is so bad that he's going to build his own bleeding-edge factory from scratch, why in the world would he say the #1 supplier is right to pump the brakes? What gives?
Well, here's the thing. Musk thinks TSMC isn't being slow at all. He thinks they're being incredibly smart. He believes they see a huge risk coming down the pipe, a risk that goes way beyond silicon. And he calls it the physical bottleneck. This is the absolute key to the whole thing. The problem isn't making the chips. The real challenge, the real limitation, is everything that has to happen after the chips are made.
It all breaks down into 3 huge things. First, you need just staggering amounts of electricity for the data centers. Second, you need these giant specialized transformers to get that power to the right voltage. And third, you need unbelievable cooling systems to keep all those high-powered chips from literally melting. Miss any one of those and your billion-dollar pile of GPUs are just expensive paperweights.
And this phrase right here, it just nails the problem that TSMC is probably worried sick about. Chips, but no power to use them. Imagine your TSMC. You make all these amazing chips, you're ready to ship them, and your biggest customers call and say, yeah, about that order, we can't actually plug them in. We don't have the power. That's a disaster. That's massive canceled orders.
Now, this idea, it's much bigger than just one company's business plan. It completely reframes the entire global AI competition, especially the huge rivalry between the US and China. All of a sudden, it's not just a tech race anymore. On one hand, you have the US, which leads with incredible chip technology, real sophistication and finesse. But on the other hand, you have China, and they have a massive, and I mean massive, advantage in just raw, brute force energy production. And when I say massive, look at these numbers. By 2026, China is projected to generate 3 times the amount of electricity as the United States. Let that sink in for a second. That's not a small lead. That is an enormous gap.
So what does this all mean? Well, it sets up this incredible new showdown in the AI race. It's like a classic matchup. Technological finesse versus pure brute force.
And here's the brute force scenario, and it's a real potential game changer. The US might have the super advanced 2-nanometer chips, right? But what happens if China can power 10 times as many of their less advanced 7-nanometer chips? In a war of raw computing power, an army of slightly older tech could absolutely overwhelm a small group of advanced tech. Quantity has a quality all its own. Okay, so let's just wrap this up. The big takeaway here is that the AI race is no longer just a chip race. It's an infrastructure race. It's about the whole shebang, the power plants, the transformers, the cooling systems. And in this new game, having the smartest chip is great, but having the most power might just be the thing that wins the war. So I'll just leave you with this final thought. When the battlefield shifts from who can design the most elegant chip to who can literally plug in the most machines, who do you think is really set up to win? It kind of changes everything, doesn't it? Hey, welcome to our explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty wild, a radical vision of the very near future. We're talking about a world where the whole idea of work could be a thing of the past in just 10 years. So let's break down the survival guide for what could be some extraordinary times ahead. So let's just start with the most jarring idea of them all. The prediction that by 2030, work, as in the thing you do to make a living, could be totally optional. I mean, that's just a handful of years from now. It sounds crazy, right? So how on earth is that even possible? Well, to get your head around the sheer scale of this change, you've got to think of it like this. It's not a ripple, it's a supersonic tsunami. Yeah, a wave moving faster than the speed of sound. Something so huge and so fast, you literally can't outrun it. The point is, there's no escaping this one. It's coming for all of us, and it's going to reshape, well, everything. All right, so just how fast are we talking here? I mean, how quickly is this wave actually moving? Well, the timeline is, let's just say it's shockingly short. Let's take a look at the key dates on the horizon. So the prediction goes something like this. We could see artificial general intelligence, that's AGI, as early as 2026. Then, by 2030, we could hit what's called the singularity. That's the moment when AI's intelligence doesn't just match us, it surpasses the combined brain power of every single human on Earth. And after that, well, AI starts improving itself, kicking off this insane chain reaction of progress at a speed we can't even begin to wrap our heads around. Okay, so what's fueling this thing? I mean, what forces are so powerful they could create a wave this big? The argument is that this entire revolution is being powered by two fundamental resources, and it's creating two new battlegrounds for the whole world. It all boils down to two things, energy and computation. This creates a couple of massive global conflicts. First, you've got the energy war. This is the race to generate unbelievable amounts of electricity, so much, in fact, that our economy might one day be based on watts instead of dollars. And at the exact same time, you've got the chip war, the fight for all those GPUs and processors that are literally the brains behind AI. And the takeaway here is pretty stark. Whoever controls these two things controls the future, period. Okay, so let's play this out. The tsunami hits as predicted, AI and robots are doing all the work. What about us? What happens to people? Well, the vision is for a complete reinvention of society and, the entire economy. And get this, we're not talking about universal basic income. We're talking universal high income. The thinking is AI is going to create so much wealth, just an insane amount of abundance, that the cost of everything will just plummet. Governments could then provide everyone with a really high standard of living. I mean, the whole idea of saving up for retirement, that could just become a relic of the past. But, there's a huge catch here, and it's a deeply human one. For pretty much all of history, our jobs, our careers, our contributions to society, that's how we've defined ourselves. That's where we found our purpose. So when all our needs are met and nobody has to work, what drives us? What gets us out of bed in the morning? How do we find meaning in a world where everything is just abundant? So when you're staring down this future that's both chaotic and maybe kind of amazing, what's the game plan? What's the practical advice for us right now? How do you actually prepare for a tsunami? Well, the argument is you don't run from it, you learn how to surf. All right, listen up, because this is probably the most important takeaway for you right now. The advice is to treat the next few years between now and 2030 as a super critical transition period. This is basically the last window of opportunity in the old economy to work, earn, and save up as much as you possibly can before the rules of the game change completely. The strategy for how to handle this boils down to that old saying, right? If you can't beat them, join them. And the logic is simple. All this future wealth is going to be concentrated in the hands of the companies that control the energy and the computer chips. You can't compete with them, so the only way to get a piece of that pie is to join them. So this really breaks down into a clear 3-step action plan. Step 1, use these next few years to maximize your capital. Work, save, do what you got to do. Step 2, invest that capital into the big tech and energy companies, the ones actually building this new world. And Step 3, by owning a piece of those companies, you basically own a tiny piece of the future AI workforce, making sure you actually benefit from all the wealth they're about to create. And that pretty much leaves us right here. This wave of change is coming. It's bigger than anything we've ever seen before. And yeah, being scared is a pretty natural reaction, but it's not going to stop it. The real challenge, and maybe the real opportunity, is to find a board and get ready to ride. So the only question left is, are you going to learn how to surf? All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into some seriously mind-bending ideas from Elon Musk about a future that, honestly, might be a lot closer than any of us think. We're talking about a future with no work, no scarcity, and lifespans that could stretch all the way to 150 years. So before we really get into Musk's whole vision, I want you to just think about that question for a second. Seriously, If you didn't have to work and money was no object, what would you actually do? Your answer, or maybe your struggle to find an answer, is at the very core of what might be humanity's next great challenge. Okay, so first things first, let's set the stage. The world as we know it, the one that's structured around jobs and having a career, well, it's on the verge of a radical, and I mean radical, transformation.
And look, the timeline Musk is talking about is, well, it's just incredibly fast. He thinks that by 2026, we're going to have AGI, that's artificial general intelligence. And then just a few years after that, by 2030, AI won't just be smart. Its intelligence is going to be greater than all of humanity's combined. From that point on, it just starts improving itself at a speed we literally can't even wrap our heads around. And here's where it gets really interesting. You'd think robots would take over manual labor jobs first, right? Well, Musk thinks the opposite. He believes it's the desk jobs, the so-called knowledge workers, that are actually first on the chopping block.
So, if nobody has a job, how does anything work? How does society even function? Well, that brings us to the next huge shift. We'd have to completely rethink our entire economic model. The idea is pretty wild. You have robots and AI doing, well, everything, all the production. And because of that, the cost of pretty much all goods and services just tanks. This amazing efficiency could kick off a whole new era of universal abundance, where not just our basic needs are met, but pretty much everything else too. So think about this. The key shift here is that we go from a world of inflation, where everything's always getting more expensive, to a world of deflation. A world where your money just keeps going further and further, all because making stuff becomes incredibly cheap. But okay, this whole revolution, it doesn't just stop with jobs and money. Nope, it goes after the biggest, most fundamental human limit there is, our own lifespan. Yeah, you heard that right. Musk and a lot of other people in this space think that living to be 120, maybe even 150 years old is going to become totally normal, just the average. Which, of course, leads to the big question, how on earth is that even possible? Well, the way he sees it, aging isn't this inevitable, natural thing we all have to go through. He thinks of it more like a flaw in our biological programming, like a software bug. And what do you do with a bug? You fix it, you patch it, you might even be able to reverse it. This leads to this incredible idea called life's escape velocity. Think of it like this. For every single year that you age, science and technology get so good that they add more than a year back to your life expectancy. So as long as the tech is advancing faster than you're aging, well, you do the math. You could, in theory, live indefinitely. Okay, so let's just step back and picture this future for a second. We've solved work. We've solved scarcity. We've pretty much solved death. We've made it. This is utopia, right? Well, maybe not. This is where things get really complicated. Because Musk has this really stark warning. You know the old saying, be careful what you wish for? Well, that's the heart of it. When every single wish you have can be granted instantly, when all the external struggles of life are just gone, a totally new and maybe even tougher problem shows up, an internal one. I mean, really think about it. Imagine you could travel the world, see every sight, do everything you've ever wanted to. You could do that every single day. Eventually, wouldn't you just get bored? That's the real danger here. When every desire is fulfilled the moment you have it, the risk isn't suffering, it's this deep, profound sense of psychological emptiness. And that's what leads to the new human quest. The ultimate fight for humanity is no longer going to be against the outside world, against nature, against hunger, against disease. The whole battle shifts inward. It becomes a search for meaning, for a reason to exist, in a world where everything is just easy. So it all boils down to this one really profound question. As we use technology to engineer away all of our external problems, how are we going to engineer our own purpose? When survival is guaranteed, what's going to be our reason for getting out of bed in the morning?